How's it going, everybody? It's Pilot Flame, and we are back with another FPL video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the tactics talk for Manchester United versus Manchester City for the game that took place on Saturday at around midday-ish time, UK time. City completely dominant in their 2-0 victory, and we'll take a look at the two different formations that each manager decided to go with, as well as we'll take a look at basically the things that caused United a whole sort of problems and led to both the goals. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new or haven't done so already. It greatly helps out the channel, and turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. Also, drop us a follow over on Twitter so that you can keep up to date with any and all FPL news, from price changes to injury news and anything in between. And lastly, make sure to give us a follow over on Twitch so that you can join us live for our preview and deadline streams. We will be doing an FPL preview and deadline stream as per usual in the next coming week for Game Week 12. There's always a pinned comment down below to let you know the exact times for that as well. So without further ado, let's talk about our partners for this video with Fantasy Football Scout. So if you haven't heard about Fantasy Football Scout, they have a fantastic members area during the regular season. It's £25 for the membership, and that lasts the entire year. And during the off season, they give a 20% discount. But if you have missed that discount, fear not, you can still get the membership for £25, and it's fantastic. You can see the membership area just behind me. You have a bunch of different stats that you can use, powered by Opta stats, and create your own custom tables. You have the Rate My Team tool, you have the season ticker, player comparison tools, a whole array of things that you can use to help elevate your FPL game. So use the link down in the description below so that you can get access to these exclusive tools to help elevate your FPL game. Sign up now. Now, these are how the two teams lined up at Old Trafford and the substitutions that they made as well. United stuck with their system that they used in midweek versus Atalanta, as well as what they used versus Spurs, a 3-5-2 system, bolstering three out-and-out center backs with two wing backs in Shaw and Wan-Bissaka. More of a flat midfield three in a sense, with Bruno licensed to kind of get forward and support the attacks when needed, and then a split striker duo of Ronaldo plus one, which in this case was Mason Greenwood. We'll talk about how that wasn't the correct choice in my opinion if you were going to go with this system in the first place. With no Varane, we see that Eric Bailly slots in as the third center back, as Lindelof has made his way back into the team from an injury that he suffered in midweek, which did not allow him to play versus Atalanta. And Bailly was very good in that game as well. We also have Pep Guardiola's side coming to Old Trafford here with their pretty much straightforward system that they normally play, a 3-4-3 system with a false 9. In this system, Bernardo Silva often found himself, or Kevin De Bruyne found himself, in these false 9 spots. And if this was the case, if De Bruyne was moving into the false 9 spot, Bernardo would shift into the left-sided midfield role, or out wide with Phil Foden dropping in, and Gundogan would then take the position on the right-hand side, because they wanted to maintain that symmetry. Right side is for right-footed players, left side is for left-footed players. So you would often find Jesus, Gundogan. So in these three positions here would be the three right footers, as well as De Bruyne could go in there. And then in these positions here, you could often find Foden could be potentially in the middle, but typically in these two, in the left-sided central midfielder and the left-sided attacker in the front three, you would see the left footers in Bernardo Silva and Phil Foden. But for the most part, it was typically Bernardo Silva in this false 9 role. De Bruyne was playing more on this right-hand side for that like deep whip delivery that we often see from him. Phil Foden maintained his width on the left-hand side, and Phil Foden's heat map was basically a big red spot here, and then a little red spot there because he took a lot of the corners as well. So pretty straightforward from Pep Guardiola. The only other change that we saw was the lack of Jack Grealish out on this left-hand side, and that was to accommodate for Gundogan in midfield. And John Stones came back in to the fold, with Aymeric Laporte being sent off versus Palace last week. So Pep Guardiola, we know that his system is very, very good. It's constantly rotating. It creates problems. It majorly creates problems for teams that are very bad at being able to control the midfield, because they often overload it. They have Jesus dropping into it, Foden dropping into it, Cancelo coming into it, Walker coming into it, and they basically can fill out this section of the pitch here. So these half spaces, as well as overloading this central part of the pitch, and then deciding whether or not which flank to go down, whether it be the right-hand side or the left-hand side, and depends on what side of the ball is. And they often like to use switches versus teams that play in, back fives, back threes, whatever you want to call it. In this case, it was a back eight, mainly because the only two players that realistically, apart from De Gea, that weren't playing as a defensive unit was Ronaldo and Greenwood. So City would often create overloads on either sides of the pitch and then look to switch to create chances from crossing angles, whether it be for cutbacks or early crosses in, which we see as one of the situations from the first goal, which should have been Gundogan scoring it, but it ultimately ended up being an own goal. We'll talk about that in the next section. For Manchester United, they often defended in a very narrow, flat 5-3-2, where we saw Wan-Bissaka and Shaw tucking into basically the width of the box. Fred and Fernandes were often creating this flat line, like a little bit of a curve, but more like a flat three in there as well. Ronaldo would be somewhat harrying the defense, more so than he's done in most of his games, as well as Greenwood, but often you would see this kind of defense from United. And the way City were able to exploit this is they would have Jesus constantly in these positions, making runs in behind, going in between the defenders, but often dropping into spaces and forcing defenders to commit to him without him actually needing to fully engage, basically. And it would cause problems for United. So does Fred go? Does Maguire go? Because quite often, until City wanted to whip the ball into this area, into the box, these three guys were marking no one, basically. That's the trouble with City's system when they play this false nine. They don't have anyone that the center backs can realistically pick up unless City want them to look at them, in which case then you're playing into City's hands, which is exactly what Pep Guardiola wanted. So we would often see Jesus in this position. Walker could be here, looking to make overlaps. De Bruyne would be in the half space here, looking to, create whipped crosses into the box. Also, De Bruyne created more chances than United's team as a whole, and he wasn't even close to being the best player on the pitch. Rodri often picking the ball up in these sorts of areas here and spreading the play. John Stones and Diaz were more than comfortable going 2v2 versus Greenwood and Ronaldo. Foden, like we saw, holding the width. Cancelo coming inside on this side here. And then we had Bernardo Silva and Gundogan just often trying to find these little pockets of space in between the defense, getting them pulled to one side so that they can drop in here and force the defender to commit if they want, with Jesus then running in behind, or if it was Foden tucking in and Cancelo holding the width, it would be forcing this defender to come in, and then Foden can then run in behind here. They were often trying to pull this defense, this back three, because if United's back three literally just sat in the box all day, they should be able to deal with crosses. Now, if you're a defensive back three and you're just getting frustrated because you have no one basically to mark, City want to pull you out of position, and they do that through quick passing, and they do that through switches of play. We often saw Rodri in mostly acres of time and space to be able to do whatever he literally wants. Walker often found himself, as did Cancelo, in the half spaces, not necessarily the full half space, but on this sort of area here, on the corner of the 18s, or often out in a wider position, these sorts of areas here, where the fullbacks of Wan-Bissaka and Shaw just did not address them. They did not try to close the cross off. They were relying mainly on Maguire and Lindelof to drop deep into the box and just try to head crosses clear from the much, I would say, not as, kind of airily dominant members of City, like Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, and Foden. Not the greatest in the air. Bailly's very good in the air. Maguire's very good in the air. Lindelof's not the greatest, but can still do a job over these three guys who are not the greatest in the air. And then you also have a situation where Scott McTominay, Fred, and Bruno Fernandes were often dropping far too deep into the in and around like the box, basically, where you have this just system where Ronaldo and Greenwood are just being isolated. Just going to remove the lines here. Rodri sits in this position. De Bruyne sits in this position. Cancelo sits in this position. Diaz is kind of in this area, kind of looking at Greenwood, but also making sure if Wan-Bissaka starts to burst forward, he can come across and stop. Stones is here as well. And City, in this sort of scenario, if the ball is in any situation, are in full control, basically. United can't really do anything. In this scenario, City can just pop the ball into Jesus, into De Bruyne, into Jesus, back to Walker, down the line to Jesus. They can do whatever they want to if United sit this deep, which we often saw on a regular basis. And if you don't address the crosses into the box with De Bruyne, with Cancelo, you know, Foden could be in this position if he makes the run in behind and gets a cutback here. You know, Walker had a cross from around this position for the first, which ultimately led to the first goal. That's how you beat a low block. You move it quick. You move it from side to side with tempo, with precision passing, pulling the defense. If they don't get themselves to set, you can make early crosses, early cutbacks, and it doesn't matter how tall or, you know, aerially dominant or in position you are. If the right run is made at the right time, when a team is shifting from side to side, they can get caught out, and we often saw that. So let's take a look at the first goal and how that kind of came about for the own goal by Eric Bailly to make City leaders after 7 minutes in to make it 1-0. So this is kind of how it was positionally set up initially for the first goal that basically, you know, was kind of a whole mess, an array of just terrible defending and stuff that we've seen from United for several years now. Defensively, Luke Shaw last season, in the second half of the season, was extremely good, as was Harry Maguire. The first half of the season, they were okay at points, but there was this myth that United were actually good defensively. Maybe they were good defensively, but to be honest, I think United's position last season was a bit falsified, as it were. Chelsea hadn't had a full head of steam yet. Liverpool had all kinds of defensive issues, and basically it was just United. There was no real surgence of West Ham like we see, or consistency from them. Leicester fell off in the second half of the season, so United kind of defaulted into that role, with City kind of running away with it. Now it's a completely different story. Chelsea have got a preseason under their belt. Liverpool pretty much have all their players back. West Ham have shown teams up with great form. They've beaten basically everyone that they have to beat, whether in you know, all kinds of competitions. So I think that it is causing a bit of problems, and United's defensive woes are becoming more and more apparent. And even when you switch to a back five, that doesn't mean you're more defensively solid. If you don't know the system, you can be caught out. Now, with this first goal here, you can see that already we have a defensive line with Shaw kind of positioning himself further up than potentially what he needs to be. I guess he can potentially look to see if he can cut off the passing lane in here if Walker looks to show for it in that area. That's fine. We find the reverse of that in the second goal, which is not ideal. So what happens? Jesus has the ball. Walker has an absolute whole football pitch basically to run into. And with the pass not being cut off, with Fred not necessarily hurried in the press, as it were, to potentially put Jesus under kinds of pressure to where Shaw could look to block this pass off, because Walker would need to be around here before Jesus can actually play the ball in behind to him, and Maguire could position himself, and Lindelof can position themselves in such a way to where they could potentially prevent that. De Gea can also come off his line and get towards the ball as well. So how does this kind of play out? So Jesus plays the ball out wide very quickly to Walker. So the ball goes out. Jesus then advances, and Shaw kind of goes out to kind of meet him. The center backs drop off. Lindelof drops off. Bailly drops off. And we see Gundogan makes his run. We'll use a different color here. Gundogan makes his run in between the two center backs. That's probably not exactly accurate, but something around that area. Foden ends up making a run towards this space as well. It's more like that, to be honest. Fred and McTominay just kind of drop off. Bruno kind of drops off, and you can kind of see the shape, as it were, to how it kind of all kind of shows how, one, Ronaldo is isolated. Greenwood is having to drop back and defend. And Ronaldo's not going to beat Diaz and Stones for pace. They're smart enough to position themselves to whereas he can't get enough space to like kind of get himself going. If this was Marcus Rashford, it would be a different story. Rashford could definitely beat these two center backs for pace. But United didn't have that out ball. And that was the real problem with playing Greenwood and Ronaldo. You have two players that are individually brilliant. Greenwood, a young talent. Ronaldo, the best in the game. Just unable to fashion anything for themselves by themselves. That's kind of the real problem. There was no out ball, and United were sticking 8, if you want to include the goalkeeper, 9 behind the ball. So the ball comes out to Walker. Shaw basically just sits there and allows him to cross the ball. And what does this do? Walker takes a touch from out under his feet, whips the ball into this kind of space here, and Gundogan misses from about there, I would say, when he makes this run into the box. And kind of, I think he was trying to cut it back across the goal, but I think he should just shoot. Maybe he gets it all wrong, but ultimately, he should be scoring that. That should have been 1-0, not the own goal, which ends up transpiring shortly afterwards in a situation where Cancelo, basically the ball comes back out towards Rodri around this area here. He then sprays the ball out quickly to Foden, who then plays Cancelo in, who then whips it across into this area where Eric Bailly sticks a foot out and hits it up and over De Gea. So again, we talked about width. We talked about how just because you have a back three and you can look to defend crosses, it can still create pressure. If the crosses are coming in with like a whole bunch of pace, if they're played in with quick timing to where the defender's not set, a la Eric Bailly in this scenario, you create mistakes, or you don't clear your lines properly, or you're not aware of runners in the situation of Gundogan. It all literally transpired in one particular play, which was about like a span of 15 seconds or so, and it's just a defensive woe after defensive woe after defensive woe for United, and this kind of exemplified it. It's very harsh that Eric Bailly was the one that did it, because he's not considered one of the favorites, as it were. Lindelof and Maguire have been favorites, and Varane being the new signing. He's obviously going to play when fit and available, but there's reports that Maguire was rushed back. There's reports that Lindelof's been rushed back. There's reports that Varane was rushed back. Rashford was rushed back last season, was injured for the majority of it, and was still playing. There's all these sorts of problems. Even Scott McTominay was rushed back, in my opinion. I still don't think he's fully fit at the moment. So United are in all sorts of woes, plus the management, and that's not exclusively the Solskjaer, is coming under question. And defensively, these sorts of things were happening with, the defensive line, the fullbacks not going out to address crosses, the amount of width that United are allowing teams when defending have been problems for probably 2 years plus now. Basically, after Project Restart finished, these issues have been reoccurring, and it's even more kind of just baffling how defensively bad United were on the second goal, which we'll take a look in this section now. So this was the initial setup for the third goal, and it's a very long, drawn-out play, but you can see how City kind of caused problems. If you look at City's formation that they have going on here, Rodri's basically dropped back into this, kind of back four. Gundogan and Foden have dropped themselves into like a kind of a double pivot here, but you can also see like the midfield three kind of acting there, and Cancelo is kind of holding the width here on this kind of left-hand side here. But you can also say that, you know, City have like the kind of, that's like the midfield three, that's the front three, and Rodri's kind of dropped into the back four and still maintain that sort of shape, although it is kind of staggered in a way. But one thing to notice is when this play starts, this was the line that United were holding, with one fullback off. In this case, it's Luke Shaw. Wan-Bissaka does it too as well, so he's not excluding. And it also happens with the center backs. If Rodri wasn't being pressed by Greenwood, he could have easily flipped this ball into potentially this space here for Gabriel Jesus to run into. That's just a bit of a minor thing, but is something that could have potentially caused United even more problems, and has done in the past, especially this season, with just weird lines. Like, as an example, the goal that Zapata scored, where Maguire's the only defender that's keeping him on side, and the line is just, everyone's up except for one defender, and it just is weird that they're not on the same page. Now, what happens here is that it's a very kind of sequence of passes, which basically result in the ball going from Rodri to Walker, who plays it into Jesus, who comes back to look for the ball. It's then eventually worked back out wide with Gundogan running in behind Fred, who went to press Walker initially. Gundogan then gets the ball. Bernardo, who had made a run basically in behind the fullback initially when the ball was played in towards Jesus, has come back onside. So the line has dropped off quite a bit here at the initial onset of the play. Everyone's kind of dropped off a bit here. Cancelo's kind of made his way in field. Foden's looking to make way in between them. Rodri's picking up a position to where he can get the ball as well and still progress it. Jesus is here. Fred's dropped off as well, and Walker's here. So Bernardo's making his way back. Gundogan is in this position here. This line is dropped off right the way. The ball then goes into Bernardo Silva. Gundogan starts to make a darting run, and Jesus looks to try to see if he can make a darting run. But Bernardo Silva realizes the play is not on. Walker's then funneled out wide here. He could funnel out wide. He could stay infield. It doesn't really matter too much. And when Bernardo Silva receives the ball in this position, the entire back line of United has dropped off completely, as has the midfield. Basically, all of United's players are pretty much that really matter in this defensive scheme are inside the 18-yard box, basically. Foden has made his way here. De Bruyne is looking to make his way in as well. And we're seeing scenarios where width is what is going to get City a situation where they can fashion a chance. So what happens? Bernardo Silva receives the ball back. Walker looks to potentially go on the overlap, but Bernardo Silva realizes now is the time to switch. So he ends up pinging a ball across the ground, a very, very crisp, precise pass to Cancelo, who receives the ball in this scenario. He then does not stop there. He then looks to make runs in the box. So Jesus looks to make is potentially looking to make a run here. Gundogan could look to make a run in as well, because Cancelo can easily whip this ball into the back post, because there's no real through ball on here. You got a bunch of United players that can block that off in towards the near post, but it's this area right in here. We'll just remark it there. This area right in here where the ball could be dangerous for an in-swinger like a right-footed João Cancelo can do. So what actually happens? Bernardo, after making the pass, then makes his way in towards the box. Shaw tucks in. Maguire's tucked in because the ball's switching from side to side. The line shifts across. McTominay shifted across. Fred's coming across here as well. So United are typically, would normally be in good stead. Cancelo takes a touch. Wan-Bissaka doesn't address him, allows him to cross. Cancelo then whips the ball in, and the ball ends up basically bouncing in this kind of area here. And what happens? The ball comes across in like this sort of let me actually redraw that. So this is the area it's going to basically bounce into effectively. Cancelo whips the ball into this sort of line here. It goes past Lindelof, who's come across a little bit more. It goes in front of Maguire. It goes in front of Shaw. Bernardo ends up coming in and around the back. Maguire and Shaw are at fault here because De Gea comes across it. Bernardo ends up knocking it into De Gea, which ends up knocking off him and going into the goal. But the problem that I am so confused with defensively for United, for City, it's a well-worked goal again in terms of their movement off the ball, in terms of Bernardo's quick switch, in terms of Cancelo recognizing that the back post has been a problem for United, whether it be from right to left or left to right all season. And this was the same way versus Leipzig last season, the Champions League, City in the Carabao Cup in that first leg where United lost basically 3-0 in the first half. It just baffles me that how can you have a situation where a fullback just doesn't, like, Cancelo is probably one of the most, if not the most dangerous crosser alongside Kevin De Bruyne in these positions, in these half spaces, that City probably work on time and time again to fashion chances. Then the ball gets swung in, and there's no communication between Maguire and Shaw, who just let the ball run, and City end up going up 2-0 before the half is over. And the game was already pretty much over at that point. And in the second half, City don't even make substitutions. United bring on Sancho for Bailly, who gets sacrificed to change the system. Rashford then comes on for Greenwood, and Telles comes on for Shaw, who ends up getting a head injury in the game. And hopefully he recovers from that. But it's just a calamity of errors to where it's like, you don't cut off the cross, you don't track your runner or look over your shoulder, and that's even for the Gundogan goal for Bailly and Lindelof. They just don't track Gundogan and Foden, who come in from behind them. Shaw and Wan-Bissaka don't cut off the crosses from Walker and Cancelo, respectively, on the first and second goal. Maguire and Shaw see the flight of the ball come across the face of their 6-yard box, not across the face of it, but into the 6-yard box in this area. They just let it run, and then it ultimately costs them the goal, basically. De Gea, who made 5 saves at least, from what I can remember, before the second goal went in, should not be criticized for the second goal at all, because it should have never even got to being a shot on target for Man City. And if it wasn't for David De Gea, United could have been 5-0 down before that goal even went in the first half as well. So Solskjaer has a lot of answers to give for a lot of questions that are being asked of him and his coaching staff. United as a team look like a bunch of individuals with no real coaching that's being, shown, and this has been the case for, I would say, 2 years, personally. United play off a lot of moments that went for them last season. I remember 2-1 Paul Pogba versus Fulham, as well as Wolves this season as well. There's a lot of different moments where an individual moment of brilliance, like a player like a Greenwood or a Bruno, bail them out with one spectacular goal, or just a complete collapse from the opponent or something like that, and allows United to basically get the edge ultimately. And this season, United haven't been getting those, and they don't know how to defend nearly as well. And that's mainly due to the fact that Varane is clearly a key component of that. United still were conceding goals with him, but they look way more organized, and you saw that in the in the start of the Atalanta game as well. And as well as, in other games that he has played, you can see him marshalling the defense, whether he's in a back 3 or in a back 4. And clearly there's some leadership that needs to be questioned there, as well as Harry Maguire, who is the captain of Manchester United. You saw him going into halftime with his head down, moping a bit, like Fred was trying to, G everyone up and try to say, hey, look, let's run into the dressing room, let's get things together. And with the captain, not even doing that, it's a bit worrying. And I think the captain's armband is a bit too strong for him at the moment too. But I've rambled on enough. Passionate United fan, as you can tell. But I think that City, again, they fashion these sorts of chances all the time. It's just a matter of whether they could put them in the back of the net. I think the 2 ones that they scored were probably the 2 more difficult ones to score out of all of them. One of which was an own goal. Another one was just they let the ball run to Bernardo Silva. But De Bruyne had a chance. Jesus had a chance. Gundogan had a chance. I think Foden had one as well. Like, they could have easily scored 4 or 5 goals in this one. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. And that has been the Tactics Talk for Game Week 11. And that is going to do it for Game Week 11's Tactics Talk between Manchester United and Manchester City. If you haven't done so already, Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new or haven't done so already. It greatly helps out the channel, as well as turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. Also, drop us a follow over on Twitter so you can keep up to date with any and all FPL news, from price changes to injury news and anything in between, as well as the content, because we do post a content bulletin typically. I try to remember most weeks, and I have done over for the international break this time, as well as for the week leading up to game week 12. As well as give us a follow over on Twitch so you can join us for our preview and deadline streams, which will be back not this week, about to start, but next week when game week 12 is about to happen and leading up towards it. We'll be doing our preview and deadline streams. We always leave a pinned comment down below to let you know when those times are. And lastly, make sure to use the link in the description so you can get access to the Fantasy Football Scout members area. It's going to help elevate your FPL game. Thank you all for watching, and until the next one, take care.